Okay, it was in the fall of 1939, and I was working for my cousin Thelma Brosman Sweet and her husband Austin, and they had built a new house. And so I was going to help them move. She was handicapped. She had very, very high blood pressure and heart trouble, so she had to be in a wheelchair. So I had to help her with the work, and it was her and her husband's mother that were all living in a rented house, and they were moving to their new home that they had built down by the school where all the Ellington children went for elementary education. And so we got things moved in the house, and it was on Halloween, October of 1939, and they were having a community meeting in the schoolhouse. And Austin said to me while we were eating supper, he said, "Now, when you finish with the supper things, getting the dishes done, why don't you come on over?" I said, "We usually have a good time," and said it'd be good for you to come. Well, I didn't know anyone there, but Austin told me I should come, so I went. And I was there, and I got thirsty, and I wanted to drink water. Well, they had a fountain in the entryway of the school, but you had to know just exactly how to turn it on, or it would just leak water everywhere. So I didn't know what in the world I was going to do. And this nice young man came over and said, "Could I help you?" And I said, "Yes, I'd like a drink of water." Well, he helped me get a drink of water. Well, then I thanked him and went on in the schoolhouse and sat down. They had benches and seats of the red where the kids sat at their desk, but they had benches so that everybody would have a place to sit down. Well, I went in and sat down, and they had a nice Halloween program. They had kids performed, and then they had songs and different things. It was real nice. I was glad that I went. And then I went home, and after it was over, and I said, "Austin, who was that young man that helped me to get a drink at the fountain?" And he said, "Well, it was one of the Ellington boys." Said he's a very nice young man. And I thanked him, and that was, no more was said about it. Well, I come to find out later that when it was Edward Ellington and his mother and his brothers and sisters that had been there. And when they got home, his mother said, "Edward, did you see that pretty girl that works for us in Thelma?" He said, "Yes, I did, and I helped her get a drink of water." So that's how we met. And then on Sunday night, after that, he came to church. We had a Christian, it was called Christian Endeavor. It was for the young people at the church. And so one of Edward's neighbors, Emmett Wright, brought Edward to 5 Points, where I went to church. And he came there to be at church, and I got to see him again. I thought he was a nice-looking man. And then the next time they were having a monthly meeting, they would meet at different ones' houses for just to get together. And I think it was on a Sunday night, but I'm not sure. It might have been one day through the week. But anyway, I was going with my cousin, Pauline Bell, and her husband. They were going to go to that meeting too. But I had to walk from my house down through the country, through a mud road, to Pauline and Rudolph's. And I had to borrow a pair of boots from my cousin that I was staying with. At that time, it was a brother to Thelma, and they'd had a new baby, so I was staying with them. And I asked them if I could borrow boots so I could go down. Well, I carried my shoes with me, And when I got to Pauline Rudolph's, I took the boots off and put my shoes on and went on to the party at Gordon Irwin's house. And we had a nice party, and there was Emmett and Edward. And Edward came over and he said, "Could I take you home?" And I said, "I'm sorry, but I've got to go back with Rudolph Pauline because I've got to take Jerry's boots back to him, Jerry or Junior's, I'm not sure whose, But one of the boys, Brossman boys, I'd borrowed their boots, and I didn't want to leave them at Pauline's, so I was going to have to go there so I could take them back home. Well, he thought that was just an excuse. And he said later, he said, I almost didn't ask you again. But he did. He asked me out, and we went on our first date on the 10th of December. So just about a little over a month after we met, we started dating. And we dated regularly, probably once a week, because that's about all he had to work at the grocery store in Martinsville, and he worked from early till late, usually from 6 o'clock in the morning till 6 in the evening. And then he had to walk or ride his bicycle home. And then he got his car, I think just right shortly after that, so he could drive back and forth to work. And but anyway, he did ask me again if he could date, if we could date, and he picked me up on the 10th of December, and we dated from the 10th of December to the 16th of November, 10th of December of 39 to the 16th of November on 1941. And so we dated for a little over 2 years, and we were married. And we were married for 62 years before he passed. So we had our ups and downs, but it was a good marriage, and he was a good man. I was so thankful that they had asked me to go to that party so I could, well, I was glad Austin Thelma asked me to go over to that school party so I could meet that man. Yeah. So I just felt like God had picked that man out for me. And I think he felt the same way. And I didn't realize that we went through our whole lives of dating and getting married holding hands. I'd look at pictures that was taken while we were going together, and we would be holding hands. We even was sitting on a car. Daryl Harlow had gotten a new car, and he came over to my folks because he thought Edward would be there. It was on a Sunday. And sure enough, he was there, so he wanted to show him his car. Well, Daryl and Rogine were just going together, my cousin Rogine. And Daryl Harlow was a cousin of Edward's. And they were standing by the car, and Edward and I were sitting on the front running board. That was the cars that had running boards so you could sit on them. And we were holding hands across the hood of the car. And then in other times, I noticed that we were holding hands. And it was so funny because as Edward got older, and he had Alzheimer's disease, and he sometimes didn't know for sure what was happening. He'd get frustrated. I'd just reach over and take hold of his hand, and he would calm down. And he did that up until the very day he died. It was just something that was just a touch. Even he might not have known who I was, but that touch was familiar to him. And I was so glad that I had that. But that was, we had a lot of fun. And I know that the summer before we got married, I went to a Christian service camp up at Lake James, Indiana. And I took the bus up there. No one else was going from our church. So I took the bus up there, and then coming back, Edward said, if you'll take the bus to Indianapolis, then I'll take you the rest of the way home. So he took me from Indianapolis back to Marshall. And I was just, so thrilled. I got to see his apartment, and he hadn't made his bed, so I got to make his bed up for him, and that was just really neat. And then he had to it was just kind of like a rooming. He didn't have any cooking facilities or anything. He just had a bedroom. And they did a lot of that. They rented out a lot of bedrooms. And so then he got an apartment for us on Broadway in Indianapolis. And we went to that apartment when we got married. We were married on the 16th of November And we went to our home. We stayed at my folks that night. And we went home. We went to our house the next day. And on the way, we decided that we needed an alarm clock to wake us up. And I needed an iron. And so we bought an iron and an alarm clock on the way to Indianapolis, to our first home. And I still got that clock around someplace. It doesn't work very good anymore, but I still have it. And I had the iron for a long, long time. And I finally got one that was a little bit lighter weight because it was very heavy. And then just shortly after that, I bought an ironing board, which I still use. I mean, I still have it. And my mother used it when Edward was in the service, and I stayed with them. I took, what things I had, and they were to Mother's, and she used that ironing board, and she kidded me. She said, "I don't think I'm going to let you have that back." But Daddy got her a nicer one after that, but she used my ironing board. So it was really, really interesting. It's just so many things that I think of that we did, and even before Edward and I met, I always liked to plan parties and stuff. And my mother's birthday was coming up, and I do not remember what birthday it was, but I thought it was a pretty important birthday. And I sent out postal cards to our relatives that was away, and the ones I could contact right around the community, I called them. I even invited all the young people from the church, and we had a surprise party for my mother. They went to town on Saturday, and I said, "Well, I don't think I'm going to go." I stayed home and cleaned the house, and Mother never even realized that it was done. She was never so surprised. In fact, she just kind of upset with me, I think, because she was afraid we didn't have things. We should have fixed meals and stuff, but I'd already told everybody to bring something. And we had a really great time.
So was your dad in on it to take her to town? Or?
I don't think I told him either.
Really?
I might have, but I can't remember telling him. But it was fun. But it was and we just had, and her brothers and sisters were there, and it was just a family, a community get together. And we just, of course, it was on in April the 19th, and it was a beautiful day. We had, I think we had to eat outside. There were so many of us, but we had a great big pine tree and other trees in the yard that it was good. And I know we had the barn lot full of cars and everything else, and the older boys played what they called Andy over. They'd throw a ball over the barn as tall as it was, and then as soon as they'd catch it, everybody'd run and go around the barn and try to touch somebody to get on their team. And there was people older than me, but I don't remember. Just it seemed like that I was only about 13 when I did that.
Really?
And but I know I wasn't, but I didn't do any cooking because I told everybody else to bring food. So anyway, that was one of the fun things that we did, and I just remember some of the older people that, of course, they're all gone now, and even well, it was the young people of the church, but a lot of those are gone. Because I was younger one, and I'm now 89, so they would have been quite a bit older. And I don't know, I've been thinking of different things that had happened in my life.
Can you
and
tell me?
I don't know much about Edward's life. What did you say?
Can you tell me about your wedding?
About our wedding? The minister that performed the ceremony was Dale Wilhoit. And he talked to us, and he said, "Eileen, why don't you have the wedding at 5 Points? And you'd be the first person to have a wedding there," because they didn't have church weddings very much. And I said, "Oh, no, I don't think so." But I wish now maybe I had. But Mother wanted to have it. We had it at my folks' house. And I bought my dress and gave a whole $7 for it. It was an expensive dress then, because in 41 things were still pretty tough. And in fact, I made $7 and a half a week if I worked all week at the dime store. I put in 48 hours for $7.50.
Wow.
And so I had to watch what I spent, and I paid $4 for my wedding slippers. And I still have both the dress and the slippers. They look terrible, but then I still have them. And of course, I didn't have a wedding a white dress. I mean, that was just, I just got a nice
blue?
dress that I wore.
Wasn't your dress blue?
It was blue. It's called Soldier Blue.
Cool.
And he had a suit that was just pretty well matched. It went together real well. In fact, the lady, we had her picture taken. Well, I'll get started. These were things that I just, but before we were married, we were planning, you know, things that to get married, and I got all of those while I was working, so I could buy those. And I bought a blanket and dishes and glasses and silverware at the dime store where I worked, so we could start. And I was able to buy those. I don't remember getting a discount, but I did. I bought them at the store where I worked, and so we had those. I thought they had pansy. The dishes had pansies on them, and I thought they were so pretty. So I bought those. That was part of my trousseau. And then I told you about the things that we bought on our way to our apartment. And then we would buy little things along, because we always lived in an apartment. It was a furnished apartment until Edward had to go to the service. And he was, let's see, it was on our second, let's see, he went in 43, and 2 years later, he left to go to the service on our anniversary. And Carol was just 9, we had Carol, he was our firstborn, and he was 9 months old when his dad left for service. And he was drawing pictures so that we could send to his dad, and especially when he went overseas. And he drew a picture of a stick man, and there was, he drew lines out on his face, you know, kind of like cat's whiskers. And I said, well, honey, what's that? And he said, well, that's Daddy's whiskers. And so I sent it to Edward, and he appreciated all of that. It was, he bought Carol a teddy bear, and I don't know what happened to it. It got pretty worn, but all the kids played with that teddy bear. And then, let's see, we went to live with him when he was stationed at Fort Belvoir, Virginia. We went out there. He called, wanted to know if I could come out. He was sick, and I was helping my folks put insulation in the upstairs of their house. And I said, sure, I'll come. So I quit working with that, got all that insulation off of me, and then I got poison from it and had to get a doctor when I got to Virginia. But we got on the bus and went all the way out there. I had no idea where it was going to stay. I went to, when I got to D.C., I got to Alexandria, Virginia, and I didn't know any place to where to go. So I got a hold of a taxi driver, and he said, well, I can take you around to some places to see if they've got a place you can rent. So I put my luggage in a lockbox there at the bus station. We got in that cab, and he drove me around. And I think the second or third place where we went, she had a room. And I said, well, I'll take it. And I got ready to pay her, and I didn't have enough money in my purse. So I said, excuse me, and I went behind the door, pulled up my dress, and got money out of the pocket that was in my underwear. My dad made me put pockets on my underwear so I could hide money in them. And I got enough money out of that to pay her for that room. And I was so sick by that time because I really got sick from that insulation. And I went to bed. Well, I went back to the bus station, got my luggage, and came there. And I went to bed, and here was this 9-month-old kid, 9 or 10 months, and old, and he laid very quietly in that bed with me. I didn't have to worry about finding him, run around and find him what he was doing. He stayed right there. It was very good. I don't know what happened to him, but he was very good. He was a very good little boy then. And my landlady she was concerned, and she brought fresh squeezed orange juice up to me the next morning for breakfast, and had bacon and eggs, and gave me that. And so then I got on the local bus to go from Alexandria out to Fort Belvoir, Virginia. I didn't know where I was going, but I went to the main office, and they told me where I could go to the hospital. Well, by the time I got there, it was kind of late, and they said visiting hours is over. And I started crying, and I said, I have traveled, I don't know how far it was, but I have traveled that far to get out here to see my husband. He's sick. And so the person that was in charge put me in a little room. It was where the doctor usually took the patient and talked to them and to see about them, when they were sick. He put me in there, and then he went and got Edward and brought him there. So I did get to see him that night. They were real good. They broke some of the rules, I think, but not letting me not go back where he was. He brought him to me. And so then we got another little, well, I think one of the places where I lived had been a coal bin, and the people had put a rod in the corner for you to hang your clothes, and they put a kerosene heater and a cot in there, and so that's where Carol and I stayed. And we'd get out to the highway and catch the bus into the camp so we could see Edward. And it was fun. We met a lot of people. That's where I met some friends of ours that I still think an awful lot of. They live in Springfield, Missouri. Well, she does. He has passed on. He passed on a little bit before Edward did. Both of them had Alzheimer's. I thought that was, kind of strange too, but anyway, they did. But as far as I know, Lucille is still living. She's older than I am. She's in her 90s, and I'm, of course, like I said a while ago, I'm 89, so I'm getting close. But it was so good to see her again because it had been quite a while. And she was so tickled to see Carol because she remembered him as a little blonde curly-headed kid. And she said, what happened to his curls? And what happened to his blonde hair? Because he had black hair then. All the blonde hair came out and it came in dark. But it was, I don't know, there's just so many things that I can think of. But it was, I went to the variety store, and I bought a pot, about this big round, kind of a stew pot with a lid on it. And in fact, maybe we used that, we used that for a wash pan. We used it to cook in, I used it to wash the floor. We'd clean it out, And I bought a plate for me and a plate for Edward, and I had taken Carol's baby plate with him and his silverware, and then I put 2 sets of silverware for us and something to drink out of. I don't remember if it was glasses or cups. And that's what I used in that little cabin along the road. And I shared it with another lady and her 3 children. And we've had a very interesting experience. Those kids of hers were just out of one thing into something else. When we go out to the post to visit our husbands, those kids, they never saw a stranger, and they'd pick up a comb and comb their hair, or it wouldn't make any difference who it belonged to. And they was just out into everything. Well, they ended up getting lice, head lice, and they gave it to Carol and I. And because this one girl insisted on sleeping with us one night. And so we had head lice, and I tell you, Edward was so upset, he really didn't even want us to come out to see him, and he certainly wasn't going to come out to see us, because he didn't want to get that head lice. That'd be a disgrace if he'd get that. And so we kept it from, I got on the bus and went into Alexandria, went to a druggist, and I said, I want something that'll kill head lice. And he gave me some stuff, and I got rid of head lice off Carol and I both. And but she never thought anything about it. I don't think she ever did do anything about her kids' hair. I don't know what in the world they did, but anyway, I got out of that apartment with her, and that may have been when I went to this place that was had been a coal bin, and it was attached to the chicken house. So there was quite, but those people, when it got cold, they felt sorry for me, and they said, now you come in the house with us. It's too cold, and they had a small house that was set up high, and air would go underneath it. But they had, I think, just one bedroom in that little house. But they took their son in a bedroom with them, and they let Carol and I sleep in Bucky's crib. So I'd get in that baby crib, and I'd put Carol in there, and then I'd get in the crib and sleep with him. And I said, when I got laid down, I didn't feel bad, but it was getting in and out of that crib that made me feel so silly. And he was the fellow that, the husband, the couple that took me in, was a bus driver, and he got off work, I'm not sure what time in the morning, probably 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And it was so cold one night, and he came over to see how I pretend like I was asleep, but he came over to see how we were. He tucked the blankets in, and then he took his overcoat and covered over us. He's afraid that we'd get cold, because they were heating that little house with a laundry stove. It was just a small stove with a small fire pot, and but that's what they heated that house with. But anyway, he was afraid we'd get cold, so he covered us up, and I felt so silly to have someone tucking me in bed. So I pretend like I didn't, because I was asleep. But, we had to walk almost quite a ways down the lane from the highway. And I know it was real icy, and one time, and I slipped and hurt my knee, tore my stockings. Of course, then I didn't wear slacks at all. I wore dresses, but I hurt my knee. Got coal, or the cinders, in my knees, because they put coal cinders on the highway, or on that road. They didn't have it blacktopped or anything. It was just put whatever they could to keep the mud from, keep it from being so muddy, and it'd make it more solid to drive on. But I always had to walk, but I had to walk clear down to the highway, which.
How did you walk with Dad as a baby? I mean, did you didn't have a stroller or
No,
just
I carried him.
carry him on your hip, huh?
Yeah.
How far did you have to go?
I think it must have been a quarter of a mile anyway, down to the highway. And then I'd get on the bus and go into Alexandria and get what I wanted to get and come back and walk with my packages in hand. Sometimes he would walk, because he could walk. He started walking when he was 8.5 months old.
What?
And so he would walk. But he was a good kid. He really minded. And one day when later on I was able to get a job working at the Army Hospital.
What did you do there?
And he went to nursery school just right across the street from where we lived. But he didn't like it. He just we've got a picture of him that was in the Stars and Stripes. He was on the playground and he was by himself up on the slide. And at the time, I mean, he'd get down and play with the other kids, but he was kind of upset with his mom for leaving him over there. But I'd come and get him when I'd get off work. But,
So what kind of work did you do?
Sand in my eyes.
what?
The kids were mean too. They threw sand in
The
my
kids
eyes.
threw sand in your eyes. And you were teeny though. You were little.
Yeah, I was only about 2 years old.
Yeah, you were.
2.
You wasn't even a year old, about a year old. Well, now when we went that time, you might have been a year and a half old. But anyway, you weren't very old. So
What kind of work did you do in the hospital?
I was what they called a ward girl, and it was temporary civil service. And I would wash the dishes and help make the beds, and help dish out the food when they would bring it in big pots, and then we'd have to dish it out and give to the patients. But if the the ward men needed help taking the temperatures and so forth, TPRs as we called them, the temperature, blood pressure, and respiration, and I'd help do that. And then they'd help me if I needed help. If I needed help lifting dishes out, they would help me. And then I remember trying to get ready for inspection. The colonels and all of the officers would come through and they would inspect these wards. And these were temporary wards. They were in just rough built wards, I guess is what you call them. But you went from one hall to another. I mean, through a hall to one room, from one room to the other. And then they got some of those all boarded in with windows so you could walk, whether the weather was rainy or cold or whatever. But some of them were open. But anyway, we would, I'd work in one ward, and then there'd be another girl would work, in another ward. But I worked in with I guess when I first went, I went in the officers' ward, and that was interesting. They were nice people, but one officer had I don't know, they had trouble with their Jeep or something, and he, for some reason, the gasoline got on him and burned him. So I don't know whether the gasoline was on fire, it must have been. But I remember when they brought him into the hospital, his skin just rolled right up off his arms, and his body where it was exposed, that skin just rolled up, and he was hurting so bad, and he swore. And I'd never heard anybody swear like that before. But after they got the pain down, he was one of the nicest people. He would never talk like that. And I remember that. Well, then after, when I worked there, Carol came home from school with the measles. So I had to take care of him. I had to quit work so I could take care of him. And they had to put, at those times, they put quarantine signs up. They put it on a big red sign, measles. Wow. No one could come in or out. And Edward couldn't come home. I don't think he could come home. And anyway, I took care of him. And they came and took the sign down when he was clear, The next day they came out and put it up for me. I'd taken them from him. And so I had to take care of myself and him, but there again, he minded so well that I could take care of him. And it was just real, I didn't think anything about it, it was just something we just did, Well, then when I went back to work, they put me in the enlisted men's ward. And I got to meet a lot of the young, some of those kids were just 18 years old, and they were homesick. they would come and talk to me, and I thought, that I was so old that I was taking care of these boys. And as I think back, I was just a few years older than they were.
I was just thinking
Because
that same
I was
thing.
only 20.
Yeah.
I wasn't quite 20
2 or
when
3
he was
years.
born.
Yeah.
And I was 20 when or 19 when I got married, and I had him 14 months later. And
Okay. Thank you. Here. Did the batteries fall out?
well, one story I'd like to tell you is when Edward got his notice to go into service, I was just devastated, because that was on our, that would have been our second anniversary. And we knew that he was going to have to go, because he was drafted. And he worked for this refrigeration company in Indianapolis. So he told him that his boss, that he was going to have to go into the service. So we left, we packed up everything and came to Marshall. I stayed with my folks. Whatever little stuff that we had, our clothes and what little things we'd bought, we moved in with my folks. And it was, I think this was in October. And we were going to have just 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a little longer, that we were going to have before he left on the 16th of November on our anniversary. And we went to stay and live in the house that I was born in, out in the country. We went back to kerosene lights and carrying in our water and slept on a folding bed. And Carol and Edward and I stayed out there. And we decided that we would help. It was in the fall, of course, and they were picking apples in the orchard. And a lot of times volunteers would just go out and pick. And so we went to Forrest Smith's, one of their orchards, and we picked apples, and then we'd come home in the evening and we'd fix our supper and eat and have our evening together and go to bed, and get up the next morning, we'd go out again. And so we did that for a few days, and we had a lot of fun doing that. Carol would go around and help pick up apples, and we just had a lot of fun doing that. And it was good to get back in that old house. And of course it wasn't too much. Daddy kept just enough furniture so that when, I think he had a kerosene stove that he cooked on. When he was farming the land out there, sometimes he'd stay at night and then be ready to farm early the next morning. And so we were able to stay in that house. It was fun. We had time just to ourselves before he left. And then he left, and that was, but when I went with him back over to Indianapolis, and I don't know how I got home, but I came with Uncle Dorsey, was where Edward's uncle lived over there, and was a barber. And he came with me to see Edward off. And Mother had kept Carol. But I may have taken a bus over there, I'm not sure. But anyway, I went with him and to see him leave. And I tell you, I was crying so hard. I started to cross the street and a car was coming, and Uncle Dorsey had to grab a hold of me and pull me back to keep me from getting hit. I was just so upset. And so when after he'd been there and got through his basic training, he called and wanted me to come and stay. And that's when we went out there then. And I'm so glad we did. And when he served overseas, and then when he came back, and I think he was over there, about 18 months, something like that. I don't remember exactly. But anyway, he came back. They were supposed to be going to the China, Burma, and India area to fight. They were going through the Panama, going through Panama. But Germany had signed papers that they were going to cease fire. And so they let them have a 15-day extension furlough. And he was able to stay 15 days, so he came through and he got to see us in Illinois, and then he went on to California. And no, it was while when he got orders again that he was supposed to go back to Fort Belvoir. So we went back there and worked until he was released from service, from the active duty. And he went, we stayed at Fort Belvoir, and they hired him as a civilian refrigeration man on the post. So we were able to get a better house then because, well, he could take over the rent because I was paying it, and so he took over the rent then, and we was there then until we came back to Marshall in '46. Okay.